Adequate logging in the cloud is a must. Without logging, you cannot know what is happening in your cloud. Effective security incident response depends on appropriate logging, as described in the various pillars of AWS, including the security pillar. If you have the proper logs and the ability to query them, you can respond more rapidly and effectively to security events. If a security event occurs, you can use various log sources to validate what occurred and understand the scope of it. Then you can use the results of your analysis to take remediation action. In this video, I'm going to describe what sort of logging is available in AWS and then how which sort of AWS tooling we can use to analyze those logs. Let's first look at the types of logs available. The first and foremost and probably the most valuable logging available is CloudTrail. Everything you do in an AWS account is taken as an API call. That API call is recorded by CloudTrail. These API calls are basically events. There are three types of events in CloudTrail. One is management event, which is in simple term a control plane event when you create something like an EC2 instance on or S3 bucket. Then we have data events. These are data plane operations and they show the resource operation performed on or within the resources, such as if you access some S3 object or you invoke a Lambda function. The third type of event recorded by CloudTrail is called as insights event. They capture unusual API call rate or error activity on your account. You must enable these events on a trail in order to capture them and they are logged to a different folder which is prefixed in S3 bucket. Now, after we are done with the CloudTrail, we can do a lot of things with CloudTrail. For example, we have CloudTrail event history, and then we have CloudTrail trail. We can even enable it for longer retention. Then you have another service called as AWS CloudTrail Lake, and then Amazon Security Lake. AWS CloudTrail Lake, which retains CloudTrail logs for up to 7 years and provides a SQL-based queuing facility, whereas Security Lake, it ingests the CloudTrail events, and these events include both management and data events. Second type of log is AWS config logs. Creating and modifying resources is an integral part of your account usage in AWS. Tracking resource configuration changes made by calling the AWS API helps you review changes throughout the resource lifecycle. AWS config provides a detailed view of the configuration of AWS resources in your account, examines the resource configuration periodically, and tracks configuration changes that were not initiated by the API. You should enable AWS config in each region where you have the resources deployed. And when whenever any security event happens, I would highly suggest you to check it in the AWS config. Okay, then we have OS logs and application logs. Now there are various ways you can use these. You can enable CloudWatch agent with extended monitoring and logging on your EC2 instances, and then you can send your OS logs and application logs through the CloudWatch logs. Then you have database logs, for example, if you are using AWS RDS or Oracle on AWS RDS, you can send your database alert logs and even database listener logs to the CloudWatch straight from the RDS. Network logs, there are various kinds of network logs which you can use. For example, you have Route 53 DNS query logs. So you can configure Route 53 to log domain name system or DNS queries. These logs are categorized into two groups. One is public DNS query logging and the other one is resolver query logging. And you can do both with this Route 53. Then we have VPC flow logs. We can configure VPC flow logs for a VPC in the account to capture traffic that enters or moves around our VPC network without the addition of instances or products. All you have to do is to enable it. Now from these logs, we can review information such as source and destination, IP, ports, timestamps, protocol, account ID, and various other things. Okay, then we have S3 server access logs. Access logs are critical to track object level access when we are using S3 buckets to store confidential or sensitive data. We can also turn on CloudTrail to capture S3 data events. We have load balancing logs, which are associated with elastic load balancing, and it provides access logs that capture detailed information about request sent to load balancer. Each log contains information such as time the request was received, the IP address, latencies, request path, and even the server responses. Then we have CloudFront access logs. And I would highly suggest that if you're using CloudFront, you should enable standard logging, which is also called as CloudFront access log. And you need to specify an S3 bucket which would store these logs. And these logs are not real time, they are delivered from the CloudFront on best effort basis. Then we have WAF logs or web application firewall logs. When associated with a supported resource like CloudFront distribution or API gateway or even your AppSync, GraphQL, or even Cognito, the AWS WAF can help you monitor HTTP and HTTP requests that are forwarded to the resource because it's a layer 7 firewall. So you should configure web access control list or ACLs to gain fine-grained control over your request, and you should enable logging for each ACL to get detailed information about what exactly your WAF is doing. If you are using Lambda, then you have to enable the Lambda logs going to the CloudWatch in order to troubleshoot your Lambdas. And because AWS Lambda automatically monitors the Lambda functions on your behalf and it sends logs to CloudWatch. Your Lambda function comes with a CloudWatch log group and a log stream for each instance of your function. And it sends detail about each invocation to the log stream, relay logs, and other output from your function code. Very valuable. Okay, so these are the sort of logs which are available in AWS. Now let's have a look at what sort of tooling is available to analyze these logs. Because for any incident response, we need to be able to analyze and query our logs to validate what occurred and to understand its scope. Okay, as you might have noticed in the previous screen that most of these logs are going to the S3 bucket. So we need to have some tooling which will query those S3 bucket. The first and foremost is Athena. With AWS Athena, we can directly query CloudTrail events stored in S3 by using familiar SQL commands, and we can run advanced SQL queries on it. Then we have something called as OpenSearch. OpenSearch is a distributed search and log analytics suite, and it is an open source, so it can not only ingest the logs from AWS but also from your third parties. Then we have something called as CloudTrail event history. So either from the console or programmatically, you can query the CloudTrail management events from last 3 months or 90-day period. This is ideal for when you have simple queries to make within the last 90 days. AWS CloudTrail Lake is also quite valuable. Either from console or from API calls, we can query stored events in our configured Lake from the time of its configuration. And I believe it stores the data up to 7 years. So it's great for auditing purposes. Okay, so if you want to do something programmatically and funky, then you can parse the raw JSON which is stored in S3 using our CLI. But many organizations also have some sort of third-party SIEM. You can use your third-party SIEM and you can point it to your S3 bucket, or even you can send the logs to it by using your own methods. So I hope that you appreciate the number of logs available in AWS and the tooling available. If you're running a production grade cloud operation in multi account or even single account setup, you should go through these logging facilities because they're not pricey and they turn out to be very valuable in case of any security event. I hope this was useful. If you have any feedback, please put them in the comment section. Thanks.